Hi, and welcome to Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians on the bluegrass situation. I'm your host, Cindy Howes. Today we have the legendary Peter Rowan on the pod today, OMG. Before we get to that, let's talk about us. Have you signed up for Basic Folk's monthly newsletter, OMG? It is easy to sign up for. There is a link in the show notes, or you can go to basicfolk.com and click on the sign up button, and we'll send you an email once a month that tells you who has been on the podcast, who is coming up, and any deep feelings that we have to share at that particular moment in time. It is a very good time, the Basic Folk newsletter. Sign up at the link in the show notes or basicfolk.com. You can also follow us on social media at Basic Folk Pod, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. We are a listener-supported podcast. You can make a contribution at basicfolk.com/donate. There is also a link in the show notes for that. And great. Okay, well, let's get to our guest, the legendary Massachusetts-born, California-based musician Peter Rowan is best known for his bluegrass roots. The practicing Buddhist did time in Bill Monroe's Bluegrass Boys, as well as the short-lived but epically important Old and in the Way with Jerry Garcia and David Grisman. However, his latest album, Tales of the Free Mexican Airforce, celebrates the music of the Southwest and draws a through line from Tex-Mex to bluegrass. Rowan has a long history with this music from his very first solo record, which includes the original recording of Tales of the Free Mexican Airforce, as well as the song Midnight-Moonlight. Both of those classic Rowan compositions got re-recorded for this new record and feature the late, great Flaco Jiménez, as did the original 1978 recordings. Flaco just passed away in July of 2025. In our wonderful conversation, we talk about Flaco's enthusiasm for Peter's music, the many collaborations they recorded, and why he included a recording of Flaco speaking on the album. He spoke about why the musical culture and immigrants from Latin America are constantly inspiring him and keeping him patriotic. He also spoke about what keeps him aging well, what his energy and enthusiasm look like at 83 years old, and of course, Bill Monroe's baseball team. We'll take a listen to the title track from Peter's latest album. This is the 2025 version of the Free Mexican Airforce, and then we'll get to our conversation with the great Peter Rowan on Basic Folk.
In the Morelos Mountains, campesinos are planting their fields, where the ghost of Zapata rides a horse that can still outrun the wheel. High in the sky above, clear out of sight, yeah, the Free Mexican Airforce is flying tonight. Remembering that God gave us herbs and the fruits of the field, but a criminal law that made outlaws of those seeking life made the Free Mexican Airforce Mescalito riding his white horse. The Free Mexican Airforce flying tonight, flying so.
Peter, thank you so much for talking to me. I'm Cindy, by the way.
Hi.
It's so nice to meet you, and welcome to the podcast.
Cindy, it's a pleasure to meet you in the magic of cyberspace here.
I know, it's wild. So I have some long setups for these questions. So here we go.
All right.
You are primarily known for bluegrass, but you have proven to be a versatile player in working in sounds like Tex-Mex, rockabilly, reggae, Tibetan, and Hawaiian music.
Yeah.
And trying new sounds is something that you've done your whole life. And I think like it's one thing to have a diverse taste in music, but you actually have like a very diverse sense of style.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from, like that range in ability and that curiosity to learn and work in other genres and sounds?
Well, several different places, but first I was born on July 4th, and I always felt that I was born in the heart of the American the deeper aspects of the American dream, the aspirations of a multicultural society. And I've always, I listened to the radio as a kid, and you could, at that time, you could get Havana, Cuba, you could get Tex-Mex music, and black gospel music was my kind of go-to after school. And then one day I came home from school, and the Black Gospel Hour on WILD in Boston was suddenly playing Buddy Holly, That'll Be the Day. And every channel I turned to, it was That'll Be the Day. And they called Buddy, and it was one of those things at the beginning of payola, where the DJs around Boston, they were all on the same page and payroll from the record companies, which it became normal after a while. But hearing Buddy Holly was like a big revelation to me. It was a very fresh sound, and they referred to that as Tex-Mex rock and roll. And I've always been a traveler, and once I got down to San Antonio, Texas, later on in my life, I just responded to the openness and the heartfelt, what we call, maybe it's not even a Spanish term, but I call it the gracias, the gracia, the grace of the Latin American culture, and the kind of like sensitive regard for other people, and to be in America from another culture. I just responded to it. It was something that it started as a kid. There was a Jamaican nurse at my parents' friend's house, and children should be seen and not heard. And this lovely Jamaican lady, Viola, took me aside and gave me a Toll House cookie and a cup of milk. And I was about 5, and she said, "Peter, you're all right." And I just that was something that just stuck with me. That the kind of encouragement that was outside of the official schooling and society as you found it at the time. And my parents sent me to once I turned 12, they thought I was going to be a juvenile delinquent, so they sent me to a private school, and then I learned different languages. So I was lucky, and I had a kind of a classical education. I had to learn Latin and French, and the music was always this sort of beautiful dance that reflected my interests. We had to read, the Aeneid in Latin, and things that nowadays you'd have to take a specialized college course for. I had the old school teachers, you will learn Latin, it's like,
yeah.
So I was stretched.
Wow.
And so I was open to many things as they came along. My Uncle Jimmy came back from World War II. I was like 46. I was 4 years old, but I couldn't forget this man coming back from the South Pacific with a ukulele, singing Hawaiian songs.
Oh, wow.
And he brought grass skirts for my mother, and we all wore these little, dancing around the living room. He was the black sheep of the family. He was the guy who carried the musical gene past the formalities. It was Uncle Jimmy always had a song. And so I was in that milieu. At 12 years old, I started square dancing, right? And then that was Friday night. And then Saturday night, it was ballroom dancing. And then the teachers had to dust off their jitterbug skills, because the radio was playing Little Richard, and I had a little rock and roll band called the Cupids, and we played for junior proms and all around Boston. And Boston itself was a multicultural place, and I heard bluegrass at that time too.
Right. Right. I am also from the Boston area.
Oh.
I grew up in another W town, Walpole.
Walpole, yes.
Yeah. So your story is interesting in that you were on both sides of the bluegrass spectrum. You played with the father of bluegrass, Bill Monroe, and his Bluegrass Boys in like a very kind of conservative setting. And you also played with David Grisman and Jerry Garcia in Old and in the Way, which was more loose and also set the stage for the newgrass movement. Mm-hmm. What have been some surprising parallels or juxtapositions you found when playing with like a more traditional bluegrass outfit, like with Monroe versus one that might not fit the trad bill, like with Jerry and Grizz?
Well, we all wanted to play the traditional bluegrass. Old and in the Way was an attempt to play traditional bluegrass. As David said in the liner notes, to search for the original grail. That's what we were all about. And the only thing that really made us different, I mean, we tried to get the harmonies right. We tried to live up to the tradition. We weren't trying to be anything but straight bluegrass. But you know, that's the bluegrass will stretch to, you know, encompass it. It's like a big drum, you know, it'll stretch to encompass, you know, individuality. But, you know, it was bluegrass. It wasn't like everything dropped into lower keys. It was keyed high because, well, it all comes from Bill Monroe, really. He said to me, Pete, if you can play my kind of music, you can play any kind of music. And I mean, he saw me, you know, he saw who I was. But quite honestly, you know, when I left Bill Monroe, I formed a band with David Grisman called Earth Opera. And we made every tune legato, which means very slow, because we've been playing such fast music. And in those days of Sgt. Pepper, what we wanted to hear was more sustained, more openness in the procession of notes. Bluegrass procession of notes is very fast and is turning out to be a savior of a certain kind of musical sensibility beyond cultural. You know, Hawaiian music is this music that Bill Monroe used to talk about. He said, I wouldn't want to disappoint my fans, but I have another music. And it was always a guessing game. Well, what's this other music like? And he'd go, well, you know, it would not have a mandolin for one. I said, would it have a guitar? And he'd go, oh, maybe one of them little guitars. So Bill Monroe's sensibility for playing, you know, lickety-split, you know, kind of hard driving bluegrass was countered by his sensibility for really slow, wide open, long sustaining note music. His Kentucky Waltz turned out to be a melody from Hawaii from a 1915 recording called Pualilia. John, I just can't remember the artist's name right now, but it was a Columbia record release, and I'm sure it got played in America. And so Bill Monroe heard all that stuff growing up in Kentucky. He just decided, it wasn't chance that he decided to play his style. It was very thought out. I mean, I asked him, I said, where did you first hear the blues? One night late on the bus, and he was playing this really soulful stuff, and I asked him, where did you first hear the blues? And he said, to my surprise, he said New Orleans. And it turned out that Arnold Schultz, the seasonal companion of his Uncle Pen, a black man from New Orleans, would come up in the summer and work in Kentucky. And that's where Bill his first experience playing live for people outside the family was with his Uncle Pen, a fiddler who had a huge, vast repertoire of tunes. The seasonal worker, Arnold Schultz from New Orleans, playing guitar, and this young kid, Bill Monroe, riding on the back of a mule. They would go out and they'd play. And that so much of that is based on the dancing. He said you would never play fast at a square dance. You'd always keep it right, the rhythm of the dancer's feet. And this whole idea that bluegrass has to be fast or is very fast is only a part of the picture. And when I asked him what kind of music he could hear in New Orleans when he went down there, he said you had the jump time, you had the sock time, and you had the slow drag.
Are those dance moves?
They are tempos.
Oh.
Yeah. Sock, I mean, and so Bill knew what those were. You play a breakdown, like bluegrass breakdown, or these things that came from the break in this dancing. It's now we're going to take a break. And the band would always play one more tune, like as fast as they could. So that's like rawhide, bluegrass breakdown, all those fast tempo ones, Cotton Eye Joe, just stuff that people knew, but they weren't even going to. Maybe one guy drunk on moonshine would try to keep up with the band, but they are those terms are for the kind of really boogie woogie that Bill brought into traditional country rhythms. I mean, there really weren't anything that were defined as this is the style. Mm-hmm. American music has always been a great combination of stuff. I mean, Elvis Presley's first recording was Blue Moon of Kentucky. So,
sure.
Yeah. So it's a Southern thing. Yes, it's a Southern thing, but it's also a very musical thing. You have people nowadays coming out of the Berklee School of Music, and they're all tremendously technically great. And some of the great ones, and I would say most of the ones I've heard, go on to play super authentic music, I mean, it is music after all, and tempo, timing. Bill Monroe always spoke of the timing. He said the bluegrass timing is what makes it really different. And so jump time would be some kind of a swing moving towards bop. And a sock time was an old blues kind of, and the slow drag, which I had never heard of, and it came out of Bill Monroe's mouth. The slow drag would be how he applied his timing to ballads. And they seem very straightforward, but there's one sort of key called Sitting Alone in the Moonlight, where it's the slow drag is how to relax within that bluegrass tempo that still is edging forward, but has a little more relaxed feel. So, I mean, there are lots of ways to look at bluegrass music and its influences.
I read about Jerry road tripping and wanting to audition for Bill Monroe's as his banjo player, but he ended up not asking for an audition. And Sandy Rothman, who ended up playing with Monroe, mentioned that Jerry opted to not audition after he saw whites-only drinking fountains in the South, and he realized he could not get into that culture. Well, what was your experience as a Boston guy playing music in the segregated South, and how has that come to define your approach to collaborations with people who are different than you?
Yeah, it definitely was a spur to reach out beyond the confines, and Bill saw that. Monroe saw that. It was odd. It was very strange to be in Nashville in 1963, 4, and 5, 66. I met people back then who were involved with a student nonviolent SNCC, it was called.
SNCC.
Yeah, and they had their first kind of march or protest in Nashville. There was nobody there. Nobody. Oof. Nobody showed up. Nobody wanted to. And the only people who were there were the white students. But the thing is, in the South, and a lot of people who are of the Northern view, that however it started, people will always learn to get along. They will always get along, no matter how it started. You know, I mean, you could imagine, I mean, I don't want to get too imaginative here, but it's just like the enemy meeting on the battlefield and going, all we got left is us. So let's, you know, I mean, quite honestly, some of the kindest people I ever met in Nashville were the older generation that came before the civil rights movement. They were just sweet people, sweet. And you could say, well, that's because they were downtrodden, but it's not just black and white. It is, you know, you go up to a little town, a little moonshine town outside of Nashville, in Cheatham County, up in Clarksdale, yeah. And you see these old farmers sitting just right next to each other in their overalls, just chatting away. One is black and one is white. It's just like people will get along if you give them a chance, you know. And there was an undercurrent of racial difference or discrimination. But, you know, Bill Monroe himself was the first guy to have Ray Charles on his opening act. Ray Charles and his piano traveled with Bill for several months when Ray was just in his 20s. Along with the Everly Brothers, Bill Monroe put on these big shows. He had a baseball team. You know what I mean? He was kind of a, you know, when you look at it, if you really wanted to go for it, he was the American dream. You
America's sweetheart, Bill Monroe.
Well, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't think so, because he has a reputation of being very tough, but that's because among his 300 band members, everyone would agree that Bill was a disciplinarian. Nobody would say, yeah, he was loose.
Right.
But, you know, back to the Jerry Garcia connection, you know, Jerry and me and David and Vassar Clements before us and John Kahn on the bass, Vassar had been in a generation, well, I wouldn't say a generation, he was maybe 10 years older or 15 years older than us, but he still had so much energy. And he had come up from Kissimmee, Florida, and joined Bill Monroe when he was 16. And he went from Bill Monroe to Hank Snow to Ernest Tubb. You know, he played with all the Opry acts, the Grand Ole Opry acts. Then he ended up out in, I believe, in Las Vegas, with this big Western swing band called the Judy Lynn Show. And that was as far as you could get as a fiddler. And so he kind of packed it in after this 10 or 15 year experience. And he was still very young. And he went back to Florida, and that's where I called him. We had a tour put together, and we had no fiddle player. And I called Vassar, and he said, I know who you are, Pete. And I'm like, oh, okay, I exist.
That's always a good feeling.
It's like, I am. Yes, it's me. And Vassar, and I said, we've got a few shows. And he just said, send me a ticket. And so he met us in Boston, kind of sight unseen. And me and Jerry and David and John Kahn and the Grateful Dead showed up. They were coming back out on the road for a show in Boston, and we did our own show around the New England, New York area. But we were never trying to do anything other than be as deeply into the bluegrass thing as possible. And could I just tell you a little anecdote? I saw Bill Kreutzmann over in Hawaii, and we sat down and we just started talking. We've always had a good rapport, and he recorded with me on some demos out here when I first came to California in the 70s. And the Grateful Dead were quite accessible as people, you know, and Billy told me that his dad was selling a banjo, and he had an ad in the paper, and Jerry saw the ad in the paper. He came over and he gave $50 to Bill Kreutzmann's dad for this banjo. And he saw this kid practicing drums in the living room. And Billy Kreutzmann's dad was a musician. So it was like, of course, son, you can set up your drums in the living room. And then Jerry went on that trip across the country with Sandy Rothman. And part of the trip was down in LA. hearing Bill Monroe, and Monroe heard Jerry jamming in the corridor, and came up to him and said, you ought to come and try out for my band when you out my way. You would no cell phones, no nothing. I mean, it was more
Right.
of an intuitive kind of world. And so, of course, idea was in Jerry's mind when he and Sandy went out across the country. And the Bluegrass Hall of Fame Museum in Owensboro, Kentucky, had an exhibit it was the front end of the Corvair
Oh, yeah.
that they took. And then there was
Yeah.
a map. You could push on the map, you could push DC, and it would say where they were in DC.
Yeah.
An incredible exhibit, really well done.
And wait, that car that they drove, I saw a picture of that car. Is it like top down or top up?
I don't know. Corvair was sort of like the first like weird sort of sporty commercially sold compact car.
Yeah.
Compact, or not quite a mini, but a compact.
I think, Peter, we should imagine top down,
Okay.
driving across the country. Jerry Garcia, Sandy
Yeah.
Rothman, top down.
Yeah.
Gonna go audition for Bill Monroe.
Yeah. So they finally came back through Indiana, Bean Blossom, Indiana, where Bill was. That was the rendezvous. And Sandy connected with Bill, but Jerry hung back. And
Yeah.
I think for all the above reasons, but also that reading Robert Hunter's latest book, The Snarling Trumpet, The Silver Snarling Trumpet, it's all about those guys before they even had direction. And I think that Jerry was starting to really have a view of things, because the first thing he did when he got back to Palo Alto was go over to the Kreuzman house and ask young Billy if he wanted to join a
Right.
band.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine
So-
if he actually was Bill Monroe banjo player?
I think you had to wear the clothes, you had to wear
Yeah.
the hat.
It's such a stretch. But can you
But
imagine?
But the thing is that Jerry tried to live up to the highest ideal that he would have been Bill Monroe's banjo player.
Yeah.
Yet the first person he hired for his project was a drummer. And I
Right.
think that, if you think of the music during that
There's
summer.
no drums in Bluegrass, Jerry.
Well, you know what? There are. But they have to be done in a way that is, it has to fit the music in a special way, very
Yeah.
special way. If you get enough people, like in my band right now, the Walls of Time, well, everybody in the band I've known for 50 years, and they've all played bluegrass. The drummer played with Alison Krauss and
Right.
Emmylou Harris, and
Right.
Mike Bubb was Del McCurry's bass player for years. I mean, it's not that we're going to try and make anything other than music, and just
Yeah.
let those things come through.
Right. Well, I wanted to ask you about the 50th anniversary of Old and the Way's debut album. So you've been performing these anniversary concerts with Sam Grisman, including, so the Sunday after this episode of the podcast releases, you're going to be performing with Sam at the Fresh Grass Festival in North Adams, Mass. And that's happening Sunday, September 21st, 2025.
Yep.
What kind of energy are you feeling for those shows? Like, how does it feel to be celebrating this album and this band that was so short-lived but so important?
Yeah. Initially, Sam Grisman's project was a little bit more about his dad's connection with Jerry, so that there was percussion in the band. Wonderful guy, really beautiful guy to hang out with and play music with, Chris Hollywood. But Chris moved on to some other projects a few months ago. And in answer to your question, I would say that we came out on stage with no idea. When somebody moves on, there's always more space. And instead of this concept of dog music predominating, it was suddenly in the middle of the first two songs, bluegrass happened. And bluegrass is the relation of string instruments to each other at essence. And so without the defining aspect of a percussive influence on stage, bluegrass just started to happen. And suddenly we were actually playing old and in the way music. It doesn't take a whole lot to jump, to make the jump into. There's a lot of jokes about it. There's a famous joke that bluegrass players, they'll drive 1,000 miles to hear themselves play. But the thing is, everybody, you listen to bluegrass people, you wonder, why are they incessantly jamming? Because they're trying to let the wolf out of the cage, but it's so technical that the wolf can't find the gap. You know, if you want that energy to take over, you've got to relax. You've got to leave a lot of space, and you have to let other people have room. And that's something Bill Monroe said. He said, you know, it's like a baseball game. You're up at bat, you're facing the pitcher, and you're going to try and get on base with your solo or your vocal. And then you got to step back. And now you're part of the base runners. You know, this next guy's got to hit something to move you further on in the song. That Bill Monroe did have a baseball team. I think was part of the metaphor of the whole thing.
What was the name of the team?
Gosh, you know, I wish I knew.
It wasn't the Bluegrass Boys? Yeah.
Probably the Bluegrass Boys. But he traded. He actually got into it. He managed for a while. He also played. String Bean, the old banjo player that he first hired, was his pitcher. String had a real long arm, you know.
Yeah. What position was Monroe?
I think he played them all. I think he pitched. I think he was catcher.
A real utility player.
A utility player, but he also stepped aside and managed, and he got into trading with the major minor league people.
Oh my gosh!
Well, you know, there are a lot of baseball teams still in existence.
One time, I was on the Rounder Records softball team.
There you go.
So I do have some experience in this music and baseball.
There you go.
I would get up to bat, and my friend would go, "Don't be afraid to take the walk." Every time. Not kind. Don't appreciate it. Now, Peter, I want to ask you about this new record, but first, of your Buddhism. So you have been a Buddhist since the 1970s when you went to a class in San Francisco with a Tibetan meditation master. What kind of similarities do you draw from your music practice and your spiritual practice?
Well, it's all part of the flow. My actual first experience, but I didn't know it, was as a child. I just felt this incredible eminence, this presence walking in the woods, because I grew up in the country. I wasn't like a streetwise in any way. I was pretty ignorant in other words, when I discovered the whole Cambridge, Boston music scene, I was the kid. You know, I was younger than everybody, but I was also able to kind of fit in with like the Lilly Brothers, you know, to be in a little rock and roll band at 15 and go into the Hillbilly Ranch, and suddenly these people are inviting you on stage. You know, it was loose. No, but I didn't know how to identify these experiences that I had, this kind of, I don't know, inner peace or a wider view. And at one point, I was living on the Cape Cod Canal.
Buzzards Bay.
And on the other side of Buzzards Bay, over towards the other bridge there, not the Buzzards Bay Bridge.
Sagamore.
The Sagamore Bridge, right near Plymouth, a little tiny town called Ellisville. And in those days, suddenly we escaped from Cambridge and gone down to the Cape, and I was still touring. And a friend of mine had studied with Richard Schultes at Harvard, And he had started out in the Harvard Divinity School, and he kept some of the books that Harvard had, and several of them were about Chinese Buddhism, and the sutras, or what they would call the sutras, were written in the Chinese brushstroke style. And I wanted to learn that style of painting. My mother was a painter, and she had instilled in me a sense of, making marks on paper. And so I did this. I don't know, I entered into the Dharma in a very casual way. I learned to make the sign, the Chinese character for man, and then the next one was the tent. And the little poem said, when the center pole is broken, the tent collapses, meaning the ego disappears once the essence of wisdom is experienced. And I went to sleep that night, and I had a dream, and just casual, sort of beautiful red Buddha appeared. And then the next day I went out for a walk, and this sort of unfolding took place where I could see that this ocean that surrounds the earth is the source of water, right? And the water is drawn up. There's a scientific name for it. We all learn it in school too. But, the water is drawn up into the clouds nourish the earth and go back to the ocean. And this cycle seemed to induce in me a contemplative sense. But I didn't know what, it was like, okay, that's the first time a Buddha had appeared. And after that, I began to focus more on what is that tradition, but it included Sufism, everything, and especially when I came out to California in 1970 and Olden and the Way started, there were yoga classes in every community center. There were Sufi dancing going on. It was like, the celebration of diversity, and it was, and then I had gone up to Barnett, Vermont at a certain point in that process before I moved west again. And I did a retreat up there with a Tibetan Lama called Chogyam Trungpa. And he said something that stuck with me. He said, curiously, when you reach the throne of enlightenment, there is no one there to crown.
Wow.
And that's it.
Yeah. All right. So not to be crass, but like being in the Bay Area at that time, did you encounter any cults or cult-like activity?
None. No,
okay.
Absolutely not. It was young, 19 to 24-year-old people on a spiritual search. I never saw anything that was weird. The whole thing was weird,
right.
and we would say this is weird,
right?
But in a good way.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
No, there was nothing up here. No, the expected behavior up here was tolerance. Tolerance, and as soon as the Karmapa arrived from Tibet and gave the black hat ceremony over just a couple of miles from here, everything changed from the sort of rock and roll hedonism of the week before in the same place, playing a dance out there in Fort Mason, and then the Karmapa shows up, I think with Richard Gere's help, and he did the black hat ceremony, and everybody was there, sort of a massive crowd. And once he had transmitted into the environment the idea of compassion and emptiness, things changed. And the Dalai Lama came, and San Francisco became an area for Tibetan Buddhist teachers, especially, to be able to work with a lot of people. And of course, some of that's gone on now, but it's still here. I think the West Coast is conducive to a kind of open-mindedness.
don't get too open-minded.
But I have to say, I was just in Somerville and up by Porter Square.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I used to live up there on Upland Road. And it was rough back then, man. I'd go out on my bicycle and had long hair, and people would shout at me. Now it's the hippest place in town,
Correct.
man. It's like Harvard Square used to be.
Yep.
And what's beautiful is there's a Thai restaurant and a little coffee shop with a library and Ace Hardware, all sort of on the same street in the inimitable style of the New England, the bright light of New England,
right.
I would say.
Mm-hmm. Man, I live in Portland, Maine now, but I used to live in Davis Square in Somerville.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Davis Square?
Yeah, Somerville. I feel like Somerville, Massachusetts is like my favorite place in the world.
It really came along.
Yeah. Okay, so you have been in many bands, to say the least, and you are still in at least 4 active bands, recording and touring. So after so many bands and so many years, what does your energy and enthusiasm level for the work look like?
Oh, it's not diminished at all. In fact, even projects that won't get done are still inspirational. And it's a collaborative thing too. I did one solo record called Dust Bowl Children. Mm-hmm. And that whole Woody Guthrie approach still is very appealing to me as a guy with a guitar.
Mm-hmm. Is that the one that Amanda is on?
Her song "On the Wings of Horses" is on that record. It's just solo. But no, the only thing that's different is the travel. Mm. The travel is, tiring.
Yeah.
Tiring. But also, I do still have those itchy feet to get out there in the country. This sort of diverse place out here. We got to get down to New Orleans once a year, get down to Texas several times. And Hawaii has been big in my recent past. Was over there, made a record over there. And yeah, at this point, I just want to focus on a culmination of these sounds,
Mm-hmm.
To try not to do everything all at once,
It's hard. Yeah. So your new album, Tales of the Free Mexican Airforce, celebrates the music of the Southwest and draws the through line from Tex-Mex to Bluegrass. And the record features some of Conjunto accordion master Flaco Jiménez's final recording. So Flaco sadly died this year in July. Mm-hmm. You two met in 1978, and you've performed and recorded with him many, many times. How did his enthusiasm for your collaborations help inspire your devotion to Tex-Mex and in turn to Bluegrass?
Well, I have really, really been blessed with working with masters, from Tony Rice, David Grisman, Jerry Garcia, Bill Monroe, Vassar Clemens, and Flaco Jiménez was a master. For example, I think I can answer your question by simply saying I would call him up and say, I'll come down and pick you up at 4 this afternoon, and we'll drive to Houston and we'll play. And he goes, "Oh, Pete, that drive to Houston, is that a 3 6-pack or maybe a case of beer?" But here's the thing. Yeah, he would drink his beer, and he would never stop playing the whole trip. He would sit in the back on the bench seat of the double cab truck, and I and the bajo player would sit. I'd be driving. And you're in the presence of a master when music flows from him. Music flowed from Flaco Jiménez. It didn't matter. He wasn't getting drunk. He was just counting the hours in a very high state of awareness with drank a beer. But he would never stop playing, either on the way down to Houston or at 1 a.m. on the way back,
Yeah.
he'd still be playing. Still be playing. That's the sign of a master. And, you know, that's how he opened a world for me. The world of Spanish music has more details of syncopation that bluegrass has another version of. Kind of bluegrass is a forward kind of beat, da 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 da, where Spanish music is da 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 da. There's a more of a kind of rootsy triplet feel in it. And there's also a high diversity of rhythms like huapango, rancheros, waltzes, different time signatures that are really interesting. And in the end, you know, rather than try and recreate them, I've just let them hopefully just be part of what I do, you know.
Let me see if it's not too draggy or not too fast, man. A ver, dame un beat ahí, Chris. That's good, man. Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's not that draggy. It's the right tempo right there, Chris.
Okay.
Ahí está.
There's a track on the record called Flaco Speaks where he's talking.
Yeah.
He's in the studio kind of setting up his beautiful accordion instrumental, Maria Elena. Can you talk about why you wanted to include Flaco's voice on the album in this way?
Well, John Lohman, who graciously supported the album through his foundation, was there. And he, as a bystander listening, came away from those sessions with different memories. And when we were talking about sending him the basic running order and it's the unknown. It's like we don't always really know what we're doing, but luckily in the recording studio the tape was running all the time. And he said, I remember Flaco talking about is there anything we can put in there with Flaco's speaking? I called up the engineer and I said, in the front of Maria Elena, I think Flaco was kind of working out how he wanted the rhythm. And sure enough, we found it. And I said, God, anything else? So put together a little, a bit there called Flaco Speaks. But that was John Lohman who requested that, because that flavor, as we know, life is short. And now we have, the beautiful memory of that recording. He was very old, at that time. Yeah. But I mean, in his personal years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In thinking about the death of Flaco and where you are in your life, you're at a stage in life where loss is very prevalent. And that loss can be friends or family passing, but also loss of function. I feel like the key to aging well is to be adaptable. And from the outside, it seems that you are aging well. So how have you been dealing with loss and change as you grow older?
I have to confess that the Buddhist outlook has been my main focus, and that deals with all those things, including how to attain perhaps a healthy sense of longevity through meditation and yogic practices. I've often thought about it, and I think I owe all of this to the Buddha Dharma in the broadest sense. I mean, I grew up understanding the world through Thoreau and Emerson, for the New England poets, and Jack Kerouac, and it's all pointing towards this enlightened view, you could call it. You know what I mean? It's not that I've attained it, but it is the undercurrent. It is the well, I look at it like the ocean. You know, there's lots of waves after waves on the ocean. You know, and then sometimes you do something called the old sailing ship tradition of the sea anchor. When there's no wind to fill your sails, you take the big canvas bag called the sea anchor and you row it out a mile in front of the ship and you sink it in the ocean. And now there's a tension between the sea anchor, which is filled with water, and the ship. And you row back to the ship and you do the hard work of reeling in that rope. So you're coming to the sea anchor. You're bringing the boat to the sea anchor. So that is one of the things that I see as you kind of have to cast ahead, cast your view out in front of you, maybe, and kind of then catch up with it, something like that. Yeah.
You say on the new album, it's both a celebration and an homage to the musical culture that inspired your classic song Midnight-Moonlight, which you re-recorded on the record, and also the kind of people who have given me hope for the future. Can you speak more about those people and why they inspire you?
Well, when I came to Texas back in the 70s, I gave my notice to C-Train, the band I was in. And I had one more week up in D.C. with them, but I stayed in Texas. And I stayed in what is now a giant commercial parking lot with banks, but back then was a barrio, a neighborhood with one hotel. And I stayed at that little hotel. And all around me were people from this Mexico mostly culture expressing their view of things. I would walk, I was the only gringo there, and I mean, it was kind of like gringos don't go there. But, you know, Steve Earle, a good friend of mine, is from San Antonio, and people who grow up in that world, they're both torn apart and brought together by this dichotomy of cultural difference. So my solution was to just kind of go. I'm the guy going into the pool hall to buy a beer after my 50-cent taco next door at the taqueria. I mean, it was very different back then. And recently, you know, then very soon they tore that whole neighborhood down and left a tourist version of it. I happened to be there at a time when these wooden buildings were still there, and there would be a padlock on the door, and at 4 p.m, someone would undo the padlock, and you go in, and somebody would bring a case of beer, and somebody would bring a snare drum, and somebody would bring an accordion, and
Here we go.
It was on.
Yeah, it was on.
It was on. So that's how I drifted into that world. But I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker, you know. But I know how. I toured so much with Flaco in England, and I saw how he dealt with people. Never got angry, you know. He always dealt with people in a very gentle way, and yeah. These guys were my mentors. and again, I think that this idea, the sense of gracias, grace,
right.
Grace in the old language, you know, the old language of Spanish, which comes again from even the Moorish side. If you say, what's your favorite time of night? La madrugada, you know, 2:30 a.m., sunrise is not yet, and the moon is still shining, you know, that kind of thing.
So the first 2 tracks on the album, Liberty and Mississippi, California, speak directly to the immigration struggles that are weighing so heavily all across the country. And I gotta say, after listening to the song Liberty, I felt a sense of patriotism that I have not felt in like a long time. I would say for me, the current attempt to whitewash American history, minimizing how horrifying slavery was, the violent and frequent ICE raids, all of this deportation have left me, and I think a lot of people, pretty sour. So how do you keep your love for country intact at such a time in history?
I mean, I'm just like you, you know. I mean, well, for one thing, also, you know, the Buddhist himself said, if it could have been changed, it would have been changed. In other words, politics is always politics, but it's driven by ignorance. You know, it's driven by self. You know, you can just very simply have to ask yourself, what's in it for the people that are making these rules and moves? And there's always a selfish motive, you know, and there's always going to be that. It's not like why does God allow evil? It's that the human mind is capable of tremendous evil, but tremendous good. The problem, of course, is education. And it seems so hopeless, too, that, you know, how can we recover from mass shootings, and how can we recover from, you know, masked, armed, government vigilantes on the road, on the highways, in the cities, you know. I mean, we don't want to, I know that, and I speak for a lot of people, we can't imagine this stuff getting personal with us, but hey, it could happen, you know. I think the government's trying to show that it is in control and will be in control for as long as they can maintain control of, you know, the agenda. And this whole, you know, I'm speaking politically now, but the whole white supremacy, you know, Christian right way of seeing things is very narrow, very narrow. I'm writing a song right now about the prayer breakfast, because you know that Trump attends prayer breakfasts almost every day where people gather around and lay their hands on him.
Whoa.
You know, and pray for him. And you know that Ricky Skaggs had a vision of Trump as George Washington.
Okay.
It's a complicated thing.
Right.
You know, but it's the humanity. The humanity is above all important, and things will change. You know, things will change, but we have to. You know, we have to be the change too.
I got both my fingers crossed over here.
I've got all my fingers crossed.
I heard you're working on a memoir.
Yeah, right now, Shambhala Books has asked for it.
Oh, all right. And so I heard you talking about this memoir and that you have kept a journal and kept notes since the 60s and used those to help you write the memoir. How did you, can you talk about your approach to writing the memoir and what surprised you about revisiting your life in this way?
Well, what surprised me was how many memories were triggered by a single page in the diary. Years ago, Ralph Rinsler, who was managing Bill Monroe and then went to work for the Smithsonian Folklife Department, actually developed that department for the government back then, worked at the Newport Folk Festival and was managing Doc Watson and Bill Monroe, kind of promoted me getting that job with Bill, and Bill and Ralph then asked me to do his job, which was to sort of be this sort of manager of the Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys, which there's plenty of things to write down about that. He urged me to keep a diary. He said, someday it'll mean something to you. And I've always had it. I have it now. It's a small book somewhere around here. But I am an incessant note taker. And I've just found that songs are often complete and you just don't want to think about them. Just write them down. Just write down whatever's in your brain. You may look at that a month later and go, wait, there's a melody that goes with this. Right? So it's my habit to take notes and to jot kind of a diary, journalism, journal. What do you call it? Journaling. I'm a journaler.
A blogger.
A blogger. But yeah, I don't use the internet so much. I'd like to. Today is the first time I've got all kinds of stuff
I'm
going
impressed.
here.
You're doing so good.
Thank you.
You're an analog blogger.
But I urge people to, songwriters who ask, I just urge them, can you write verse? Read Robert Frost. Read William Butler Yeats. The kind of the end of the versifying, or read the early American, was it Malcolm Crowley? I don't know. There's just so many people who write in verse. I go down to the ships today, and all these little high school poems you had to memorize and recite in front of the class. I think it's very exciting to me, the energy of the human mind, and if it doesn't take a word, I try and get the shape, or even the mark. This whole thing in the art world of marks, and it is fascinating. And you look at these ancient cave paintings, and we're part of this continuum of history of people making marks and say, I remember. Yeah, it comes down to the campfire and telling stories, and Texas, bless its heart, in the musical sense, Texas still has the campfires alive down there. Kerrville Folk Festival is one of the last places that has an outdoor festival. It's a great tragedy of this recent time down. We were just there. But there's a heartfelt group of people that want to keep the campfire lit and want to hear the next story. And I think that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Do you know when we might get the book?
Well, I just spoke with Shambhala, which is it's great. Sam Birchholz out in Berkeley started Shambhala years ago to publish the works of Chogyam Trungpa, a reborn incarnation master from Tibet, and somehow it's maybe right, that I'm going to be on that publishing roster. Plus, they're distributed by one of my favorite book publisher distributors, which is Penguin Books. I have Penguin Books that I have found them everywhere. You know what I found when I was in England? I went to one of those charity shops, and they had a pile of old Penguins just all stacked up there on the shelf. And I found the original James Bond books. And they were each like 25 pence or something.
Right, put them all in your suitcase.
I bought them all. I put them all in my suitcase, and I read them all, and the pages as I read them disintegrated. Oh, wow. They're like time capsules from
disappearing.
Yeah, and it's great. I just love opening a Penguin book and seeing, New Delhi, Edinburgh, London, New York, and it's like, oh yeah. It's the world,
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to your memoir whenever it comes out. Before I let you go, can we just do a really quick lightning round? Okay.
Sure.
Here we go. These are like quick answers. What is your ideal stage outfit?
Oh, man. I'm not going to be very fast at this, but you can edit it. It's so funny. I favor kind of things made in Japan. They're just so comfortable, And but when I play Japan, they go, Peter, where's your sports jacket? They don't want me to look Japanese. So So, basically something that is sort of like a tapestry of cultures.
Beautiful.
Maybe put things together in a unique way,
When you are on tour, going from place to place, what are you listening to when you're on the road?
Whatever it is. You can listen to the kind of AI generated music, and there's so much of it involved in the pop music world now. But everywhere you go, you get on an airplane, they're playing music from the 80s. They're playing singer-songwriters. They're playing personalities, Carole King. They're playing people who were, individualistic. Now, I know that in rap and the related musics with, the big backbeat and stuff, a lot of it comes from Jamaica. And there's a lot to listen to in there. There's nice layers and beautiful, beautiful things. But I find that people, when they're listening to music outside of the radio, tend to listen to sort of these personalities, Jim Croce and people who wrote songs. I think there's an undercurrent of that anyway. The people, they're more personal. The music of today is like kind of, this is the throb of the modern world, But I have to say,
That's the pull quote.
A lot of it comes from Jamaica.
All right, I got two more questions. What is your favorite type of live concert setting to perform in?
Thousands of people. No, I would say Telluride has always been good, but actually, I'd rather play to a small group in Ireland, where people are just they love all about
Yes.
it.
Okay, this is the last one. Where is the most beautiful place in the world?
Wow, man. I would say in the musical trail, you get up to Telluride and you will transcend. Your music will transcend because the environment is so pure and so huge. But it may be at the end of some long valley in the Himalayas. It may be just that old person who's lived there for centuries and millennium is still alive, and they look at you and you suddenly feel the depth of human potential. Yeah.
Wow.
The heights of non-ego ambition.
Yes. Peter Rowan, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
This episode of Basic Folk was produced by C.J. Nungesser. Dietrich Strauss composes our music. Basic Folk is a production of the Bluegrass Situation. You can find all of our episodes there. You can check us out on folkalley.com or Folk Alley's mobile app. You can search for Basic Folk on SiriusXM's app. You can also go to our website, basicfolk.com, or you can check us out wherever you get your shows. If you enjoyed this episode, perhaps you should send it to a friend. Maybe that friend who just loves bluegrass and loves Tex-Mex and just doesn't know how to see the through line, but Peter Rowan can show them. And also, maybe that person is interested in baseball. That would be 3 important attributes in order to send it to that friend. Or you can just send it to whoever you want. That's totally fine too. All right, thanks for listening all the way to the end. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.